Hey guys, welcome to an episode of True Crimes and Weird Times. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Kim.
And I'm Ronny.
Hey!
I'm going to be telling you about the McMartin Preschool Trial. This was a trial that was originally held as the largest and most expensive child molestation case ever, and is actually part of the infamous Satanic Panic movement in the 80s. And today we actually have a special guest with us, my husband Ronny, who has been very vocal about this case, but also has experience in this area as well. And Ronny, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a 7-year criminal investigator with a local law enforcement agency. My background is actually crimes against children, and I'm actually assigned to a task force that deals with the same subject.
Perfect. So we're all going to be telling you about this case today.
Awesome.
So the story all began on August 12th, 1983, when Judy Johnson reported to the police that her son Billy, who was 2.5 at the time, had been sexually assaulted by Mr. Ray. Now, Mr. Ray was Raymond Bucky, a teacher at McMartin Preschool in Manhattan Beach, California. He worked alongside his sister, Peggy Ann Bucky, his mother, Peggy McMartin Bucky, and his grandmother, Virginia McMartin, who was also the founder of the preschool. So it was a family business. They had other teachers, but, it was a family affair. But it's also worth mentioning that Ray Bucky was also Judy's estranged husband who had left her.
That's not grudgy at all.
No. So Judy had taken Billy to his pediatrician because he complained of it hurting when he went to the bathroom, that his anus itched, and she also said that she found a rash and rectal bleeding, which Judy actually told the police later that it was just like a spot of blood. So
not a large amount of active bleeding.
Right. And this isn't something, it's something to worry about, but this can easily happen just with a bout of constipation.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
yeah.
So I understand if a parent is concerned, but at the same time, you have to look at it from both sides.
Yeah.
That especially in line with the itching.
Yeah. But this was 1983. This is around the same time as another string of daycares have been involved in cases like this, child molestation, Satanic Panic, which we'll get to in a little while. So they're going to take this pretty seriously at the time. Also, there were some sources that say that there was actually no proof that Billy had actually said any of this stuff. Judy was just the main mouthpiece for Billy during this entire investigation. And you'll see in a little while that Billy had some wild accusations. But of course, police take this stuff seriously and they question Ray. But there was nothing really that was done because they didn't have any evidence that Ray had done anything at all other than what Judy had said. So, and this is the part that kind of just throws me for a loop. But after Ray has been questioned, Police Chief Harry Kohlmeyer sends out a letter to 200 parents of both past and present students of the McMartin Preschool, informing them that Ray Bucky is under investigation for child abuse, and also asking parents to ask their children about the sexual abuse and relay any of this information to the police department.
What could go wrong with that?
What could go wrong with that?
Oh my God.
Solid police work.
Yeah.
Here, guys, interrogate your own children and lead them to let you know if they've been abused or not.
They're already throwing his name. I'll just read the letter. September 8th, 1983. Dear parent, this department is conducting a criminal investigation involving child molestation. Ray Bucky, an employee of Virginia McMartin's preschool, already dropping names, by the way, was arrested September 7th, 1983 by this department. The following procedure is obviously an unpleasant one, but to protect the rights of your children as well as the rights of the accused that they already told them the name of, this inquiry is necessary for a complete investigation. Records indicate that your child has been or is currently a student at the preschool. We're asking your assistance in this continuing investigation. Please question your child to see if he or she has been a witness to any crime or if he or she has been a victim. Our investigation indicates that possible criminal acts include oral sex, fondling of genitals, buttock or chest area, and sodomy, possibly committed under the pretense of taking the child's temperature. Also, photos may have been taken of children without their clothing. Any information from your child regarding having ever observed Ray Bucky to leave a classroom alone with a child during any nap period, or if they've ever observed Ray Bucky top a child, is important.
What?
Yeah.
So there's no subjectivity there whatsoever.
What? None.
A completely objective letter.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Please complete the enclosed information form. Just, write it all down. And return it to this department in the enclosed stamped return envelope as soon as possible.
What?
We will contact you if circumstances dictate same. We ask you to please keep this investigation strictly confidential.
Why?
Wait, what?
Because of the nature of the charges and the highly emotional effect it could have on our community. Please do not discuss this investigation with anyone outside your immediate family. Do not contact or discuss the investigation with Raymond Bucky, any member of the accused defendant's family, or employees connected to the McMartin Preschool. And in all caps, it says, there is no evidence to indicate that the management of Virginia McMartin's preschool had any knowledge of this situation, and no detrimental information concerning the operation of the school has been discovered during the investigation.
So there's the don't sue me clause.
Yeah.
It sure is.
Also, no other employee in the school is under investigation for any criminal act.
Okay, so if your child says that another teacher touched them, don't believe them.
Right, it's just this one.
Just this one.
Well, you'll see what happens. So, parents are naturally going bonkers.
Well,
Right.
yep.
They're questioning their kids. And, I assume, I would. I'd be like, who touched you? Who touched you? So, and of course, they're going to the police about any little thing because they're worried that their child has been sexually abused. And I'm sure Ronny can attest to how many people have contacted the police department.
Well, we've not had one quite this.
Well, no,
big,
not at this scale, yeah. But over things.
It's very common that when there's one, when we have, in fact, I did one last year where we arrest an offender, and that member was, let's say, a coach or a preacher, pastor. It's not uncommon for us to have victims of the past come forward, or even, hey, he coached my child. Just want to let you know that. And I'm sure you'll get into this later, the interview portion of the children later on. But going out and actively looking for victims is not the way to take care of this type of case.
Yeah. This is going to cause a frenzy.
Well, parents are going to do things like, did they touch you? Because it's okay to tell me. You should tell me if they touched you. And the kid's going to think like, oh, I'm supposed to say this.
Oh, we are going to get into that.
And that is why when we get these things, one of the first things I say to a parent is, we don't want you asking the kid any more questions.
Yeah.
It's fine to let them talk if they approach you and just let them talk, but don't ask them questions about it.
Yeah.
And it's hard for parents to reconcile that.
It would be.
That, as a parent, I can't ask my child questions about something as serious as sexual assault or child molestation.
And I totally get that because that's you don't want your child to have to live with that, and you want to know if something like that's happened. I get it, but it's going to cause a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
So, all of these parents are coming out and saying, little Sam has a red mark on their body, or I don't know, just people coming out with every little thing that they can possibly find. But Judy Johnson is also coming back to the police with so many more claims from Billy. But they're starting to get a little bit scary, bizarre, strange. And I'm just going to list out the information that's the notes from a deputy district attorney from Judy, who called him up and was telling him all this. It says, Billy describes having communion in a church. A prayer similar in sound to the Lord's Prayer was recited. A goat climbed up higher, higher, higher. Then a bad man threw it down the stairs. It woke up later. Ray poked Peggy at the altar, which everyone assumes sex.
Yeah, but who's Peggy?
Well, now there's two Peggys. His mom is Peggy McMartin Bucky, and his sister is Peggy Ann Bucky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of candles. They were black. Ray pricked his right pointer finger. It bled. Ray put it in the goat's anus.
What?
Yeah. Oh, it gets better. Hang on. Nobody had clothes on under their robes. Billy had a robe on too. They put a Band-Aid on his finger. Old grandma played the piano. I'm assuming old grandma is Virginia McMartin, maybe? Since she's the grandmother?
I guess.
I don't know. Lots of threats were made against Billy and his family. It was unclear whether it was a doll or a real baby. Billy says that it was a real baby, but the head was chopped off and the brains were burned.
What?
Yeah. Billy said Peggy killed the baby. Peggy had scissors in the church and she cut Billy's hair. Where would be the proof in that, by the way? You would know if your child's hair was cut.
Right.
Yeah.
Billy had to drink the baby's blood. Ray wanted Billy's spit. He put it on the altar. The baby was big like Billy. It screamed. When Billy's bottom was bleeding, Ray put a Tampax, which is a tampon for anyone who doesn't know, in his bottom to stop the bleeding. Then he took it out. The red circled people in this ad, which she was referring to a newspaper ad for a local health club, are all familiar to Billy. The 3 women are witches that were in this ad. The man poked them. Peggy, Babs, and Betty. Babs and Betty are 2 other teachers at the school. Dressed up as witches too. The person who buried Billy is Miss Betty, and there were no holes in the coffin. Babs went with him on a train with another girl where he was hurt by men in suits. Ray waved goodbye. The train moved fast. It had lights. Ray took him back to school, possibly Big Brothers, which is a local organization. Peggy gave Billy an enema before he was taken away from the school. Staples were put in Billy's ears, nipples, and tongue. Again, there would be proof of that somewhere.
Yep.
Babs put scissors in his eyes. Definitely be proof of that.
Yep, you would definitely know if someone stabbed you in the eye with scissors.
She hit him a lot. She chopped up animals and said she would come in the night and take away. I don't know. Take away what? I don't know.
Take him away?
Maybe. There were threats, or there were kids that said that there were threats of they were cutting up animals and telling them that's what they would do with their family if they never told anyone. Yeah. She pushed his stomach and threw him against the wall. Again, pretty sure you would know that. He has extreme fear regarding Babs. Also, something awful would come in the window. Ray made small babies cry. Billy was hurt by a lion. An elephant played with the lion, squirted H2O.
What?
The lion didn't move. Billy was on his back. Ray let him pull the lion's tail. The lion roared but didn't move. Betty was there and other people. One lady took pictures.
I would like to see these pictures.
The next day, she called again and said Billy feels that he left LAX in an airplane and flew to Palm Springs. Described the airplane as one like used by Federal Express, which is FedEx now. Only it had windows. Billy went to Armory located behind Judy residence. And there's a question mark because I'm pretty sure the guy taking the notes was not.
He probably was on the same page as us, right?
Yeah.
Ray drove there in his VW bus. Billy went with Peggy, who drove a red and white VW bus. At the Armory, there were some people there wearing Army uniforms. The Goat Man was there. After going to the Armory, Billy was taken to Sand Dune Park. At the Armory, it was a ritual-type atmosphere. When Billy was taken to a church, Judy believes it was the Church of Religious Science. At the church, Peggy drilled a child under the arms, the armpits. Atmosphere was that of magic acts, and Ray flew through the air.
Okay, so
this is extremely detailed.
Yeah, he knew a lot of words for 2.5.
2.
Yeah.
You said 2.
Yeah.
2.5.
2.5.
2.5.
I could definitely see my 3-year-old spinning a tale like this after he's been given a few details.
After he's been given a few.
Right.
That's the key, though.
And then there was a lion, and it came in the window, and there was an elephant. Like, I can totally hear my son doing all that.
Yeah, but then it starts talking about the church and the Army people at just what? I don't know. But, okay. It's also important to go ahead and note that Judy Johnson was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia.
It's a minor detail.
That's a
minor detail.
Yeah.
Just throwing that in there. And she also was an alcoholic. She actually was found dead in her home in 1986 before trials actually began due to the complications from her alcoholism. So just throwing that out there.
That seems like a super important detail, Ashley.
I mean, I guess.
Obviously not to the police, but to me.
Well, here's the thing, and I don't really mention it, so I'm just going to mention it now. They kind of kept that under wraps for a little while.
For good reason.
Yeah, for good reason.
It's kind of detrimental to their case.
Yeah. During the trials, they kind of kept that under wraps until somebody found out. So the police might not have known.
But somebody important knew, and they could have done something about this.
I think they, at the point that they let this information out, they were in too deep. So, but back to the story. So after this letter had been sent out, parents were starting to contact the police. They were, of course, terrified that their children had been sexually abused, possibly. The police department hired an abuse therapy clinic by the name of Children's Institute International, or CII. And this is where things just go bonkers.
It wasn't already bonkers?
Yeah. And this is where the psychology part comes in. This is the big reason why I chose this story. It's already crazy, but the psychology behind this is insane. So CII was hired to interview these children. They were to get the full story from them of what had happened, how they were abused, what these teachers were doing behind closed doors. And CII was run by a woman named Key McFarland. She's going to also be running some of these interviews with the children. But I'm going to give you another important note. Key later testified before Congress that she believed that a network of child predators were using daycares as a cover for child pornography. So this woman already had a biased opinion about all of this. So, I mean, take a guess how this is going to work out.
So she's going into this with a mindset of preschools are just there for child porn anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Seems like a terrible person to interview these kids.
And, okay. So we were actually watching, it's not a documentary, it's a movie. It's called Indictment.
The McMartin Trial, I think is the name of it.
Something like that. And the woman who plays Key McFarland in this movie, I just want to punch her in the face. Because, like, they're showing her interviews in the trial, and she's just, like, super smug about it.
Aw, man.
Yeah, like, she's really proud of these interviews. And it's just, ugh. Anyway, so CII begins interviewing hundreds of children, and by the spring of 1984, CII claimed that 360 children had been abused at the McMartin Preschool.
All by the same person?
Same people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Ray is going to be the main one in this, but yeah, other people too.
Okay.
Now, this seems really, like, alarming until you start to, like, hear these interviews. And these interviewers are using techniques that are giving these children opportunities to pretend or speculate events.
Which is absolutely not how we do forensic interviews nowadays.
Huge no-no.
As part of my training, I'm actually a forensic interviewer myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not often that I interview children.
Yeah.
However, I can if I need to.
Yeah. I know that you've watched interviews.
Yes, we have a local child advocacy center, and that's where we have what's called a forensic interview.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say they don't do it the way that they did it back then.
Holy cow, no. Well, none of them ever dressed up in a clown suit, right?
Right.
Okay.
Wait, what?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was Key McFarland that did it. They're using these people. She dressed up like a clown for some reason. They're using puppets, which is not that big of a deal until you see how they're using them. And she's also using anatomically correct dolls. Again, not an issue until you realize how they're using it.
Which I mean, as the whole child advocacy community, have kind of strayed away from the anatomical dolls. I know ours does not use them anymore. However, they do use anatomically correct drawings of both children and adults.
Oh, okay.
And they don't even like doing it then. But when you're dealing with 3 and 4 year olds, which I will say is the absolute youngest you would do, I would not interview a 2.5-year-old.
Yeah.
That the drawings sometimes help the child understand, or help the interviewer understand which body part they're talking about.
Well, and I also assume that these kids call their body parts something else.
A lot of times they do, most kids don't know the names of their genitals. So.
Yeah, which is a really big reason I use. It's weird hearing your kids say it, but I want them to know the names. You know?
Yeah, it's important not to call it something cutesy like cookie and butterfly.
It also throws off the bad guy if they're ever in that type of situation.
Yeah, I assume it would.
And when you give your kid knowledge that these are the names of these parts, and no one are supposed to touch these parts, I mean, it kind of reinforces that body safety.
Yeah. So I'm going to go over some of these techniques that they were using so that you get an idea of how these interviews were run. And I actually took this from a Journal of Applied Psychology article that they are using as teaching materials. And the McMartin case is the biggest one they were using. So one of the techniques they were using is called suggestive questioning.
That even the title sounds wrong.
Yes. Yeah. That's because it is.
That's because it is. Now, this introduces new information into an interview that the child didn't already have knowledge about. For example, in one of these interviews, a child was asked, "Can you remember the naked pictures?" when no picture taking or nudity had been mentioned at all during this interview. And then in another interview, the interviewer says, "Who do you think played that game?" And the child says, "Ray and Miss Peggy." "Ray and Miss Peggy? Yeah. I bet she looked funny, didn't she? Did she have big boobs?" "Yeah." "And did they swing around?" "Yeah."
Perfectly appropriate for a child.
But they're giving them information. Like, nobody mentioned Miss Peggy's boobs at all, except the interviewer who's feeding them this information.
See, that is just the biggest no-no in modern forensic interviewing. You cannot introduce information that hasn't been gained. Mm-hmm. The way we start out the forensic interview is that after spending a few minutes getting acquainted with the child, asking just normal questions, do you like school? What do you do in school?
Oh, okay.
We move into the disclosure phase, meaning that we ask, well, what brought you here today?
Yeah.
And that's
leaving it open for them.
That doesn't lead. That doesn't put any new information into that child that he didn't come there with.
Yeah. Another technique they were using, this article was calling it other people. Now, this consists of telling the child that the interviewer has already talked to other kids, other people, whatever, and they have already gotten this information. So in one of the interviews, the interviewer said, everyone in this class photo, like, they were asking the child to point out the kids who have been touched, whatever. But what they said was, every single kid in this photo has already come to tell us about a bunch of yucky secrets from your old school. So already the kid is like, oh, well, everybody else said it.
Right. Everyone else did it. I better do it too.
Yeah. And in the same interview, the interviewer said, we know about that game, talking about something called the Naked Movie Star game, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But they go on to say, because we just had 20 kids told us about that game. Do you think if I ask you a question, you can put your thinking cap on and you might remember? So,
oh, my God.
Yeah. So, like, they're already getting the idea of, oh, all my other friends have talked about it. Maybe I do know about it. Or just saying yes to conform.
Or just feeling the pressure to answer correctly.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of these, too. The next one is called Asked and Answered. And this is asking the child a question that he or she's already answered immediately before. So, for instance, the interviewer says, can you remember the naked pictures? And the child shakes their head no. And then they say, can't remember that part? And the kid shakes their head no again. So clearly they don't know anything about this. And then the interviewer says, why don't you think about that for a while, okay? Your memory might come back to you. So, like, you're just pressing them.
This is unbelievable.
Yeah. And the problem with this is that this kid is hearing the same repeated questions, and they're assuming that they're just giving the wrong answers. So eventually they're just going to give them the answer that they think the interviewer wants to hear.
Right, exactly. I mean, that works on adults too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Of course it's going to work on a kid.
And what amazes me is that, even asked and answered is an objectionable question in a courtroom setting. So why would it be okay for...
Yeah.
You can't get someone on the stand and ask and do the same techniques.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that.
Leading is also an objectionable action.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not something that can happen in a courtroom setting. So why would it be okay for an interview with a child?
Right. The next one is called inviting speculation. This is asking the child to offer their opinions or something, or what they think about past events using their imagination, or let's solve a mystery. Like, what do you think happened? Let's figure out what happened, or let's pretend what might have happened. So, for instance, one of the interviews, the interviewer said, what do you think? Let's ask Mr. Rags. They were using a puppet. Maybe he can get his pointer out and we can figure this out. And whatever the child says is unintelligible. But the interviewer says, now, I think this is another one of those tricky games. What do you think, Mr. Rags? And the child is Mr. Rags. They're talking for him. And it says, yep. And the interviewer says, yes. Do you think that some of that yucky touching happened, Rags, when she was tied up and she couldn't get away? Do you think some of that touching, that Mr. Ray might have done some of that touching? Do you think that's possible? Where do you think he would have touched her? Can you use your pointer and show us where he might have touched her?
What?
Yeah. So, like, it's just giving so they just think they're playing now.
Right. That's literally use your imagination.
Yeah.
Make believe. I mean.
So they're just going to say whatever at this point. Another one, and this one's pretty straightforward, positive and negative consequences. The positive consists of, like, promising or implying praise. That's right. Yeah, good job. Approval agreement if they give the answers that they want. In one of the interviews, after a series of some suggestive questions, the child finally agreed that a teacher photographed children while they were naked, and the interviewer responded, "Can I pat you on the head? Look at what good help you can be. You're going to help all these little children just because you're so smart."
I feel like I can't say what any more times.
I know.
Yeah,
It's so screwed up.
It's so egregious that this could have even happened, but sadly, that's why.
And they took it to court.
Yes, that's the biggest thing with me is that this went forward with indictment. These people's lives, the livelihood is destroyed because of stuff like this, and not to mention the fact that if something had happened, it's now covered in this mess.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Oh, and the negative consists of criticizing or disagreeing with the child's statement, making them feel like it's a disappointing answer or the wrong answer. And this one is the most infuriating to me because in one of the interviews, a child denied anything happening by the teachers, and the interviewer then responded, "Are you going to be stupid or are you going to be smart and help us here?" Now, they're talking to a puppet, but they're talking to the child.
Right.
Oh, man, that makes me so angry.
Yeah.
It's sick. It's,
Well, and a few questions later, she told the child's puppet, "Well, what good are you? You must be dumb." I mean, this is disgusting.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
I don't even have words.
Yeah. Because you know that the child doesn't understand that they're talking, I'm putting that in air quotes, talking to the puppet. I mean, the kid is hearing that about themselves.
Right. You're talking to the kid, and they know that.
Yeah, they're not that dumb.
I hate these people.
Mm-hmm. So, there's that. So, at the beginning of these interviews, most of these children were actually denying any rape or molestation. But because they're using these techniques, a lot of them were finally agreeing that something did happen. There were some articles about kids that are now grown talking about it, and they were like, "Look, we felt like we were trapped. We were there forever. We just wanted to give the right answers. We wanted to impress the interviewer, or we just wanted to get out of there and be done with the interview because no kid wants to sit there and deal with that stuff anyway." So they're just giving them whatever answer they want to hear. And of course, now they have all of this, and CII think they have so much great evidence. Now, in addition to these interviews, Astrid Heppenstall-Hager was performing the medical examinations for CII, and she took photos of what she considered proof of the abuse. But this wasn't damning evidence. I mean, there were marks on the kids, but they were minute scarring, and she claimed that it was from anal or vaginal penetration. But there's other things that this could come from. Some of the scarring is normal in young children because, one, they're still growing. They're going to have bumps and bruises and tears, but constipation can cause tearing, and even a fall in like a little girl could cause small vaginal tearing. So this could just be simply something that happened. Were the kids abused? I don't know. And we won't know for sure now because they've definitely messed this case up. But like,
if there had been a victim, like a legitimate victim, they ruined it, like Ronny said.
Yeah, there's absolutely no recovery from that.
And while these could have been from abuse, there should have been more proof than just, this minute scarring to go with that evidence.
And how do you say for sure it was the teacher? What if that had happened at home?
Exactly.
Right, exactly. Before we leave from the forensic interview process, I just want to point out that when we do these interviews, the way we know whether a child's telling the truth or not, we look for what's called sensory details. Not, well, this person was here, she's wearing a blue shirt, not anything like that. How it looked, how it felt, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because people in general, but especially a child, have difficulty maintaining a lie.
Well, when there's more details.
Well, about how something felt.
Right.
You know, a child's not going to know what it, not to get graphic, but what it feels like to be penetrated vaginally.
Yeah.
And so if a child can not provide that detail, then that's kind of a red flag for us.
Yeah.
And it's not often that we have that happen. I mean, most of the time they are telling the truth.
Right. And honestly, had CII used some of that, it would have been much more believable.
But when
they botched this up so bad.
They weren't interested in getting the truth. They were interested in getting their case.
Right. And I fully believe that. So just as all of this was about to go to court, CII also dropped a bomb about allegations of satanic rituals. This is where the satanic panic part comes in. They said that there were allegations of teachers flying. There was a maze of tunnels underneath the school that kids would be taken through to go to other rooms or places.
Which is verifiable if they would just go get a search warrant and look.
After the trial,
Wait, after?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The trial.
Well, actually, it might have been during, but I'm pretty sure it was after. Like, they had an archaeologist come out and dig up around the school. And no tunnels.
Imagine that.
Yeah, they found remnants of an older building that was there, and there was some talk about it looked like tunnels, but they never actually dug for them, but they say that it was possibly just like trash ditches for whoever owned the property before.
So gutters, essentially.
But no tunnels, nothing weird like that.
If you already have to bring in an archaeologist to find out if they used to be there, they're probably not being used.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But there were allegations of satanic altars everywhere. Adults were having sex with animals. Children had seen goat people. And I'm assuming they're basing this off Judy Johnson's allegations earlier, and they're just using this to question the kids with.
That makes sense.
Yeah. They had traveled in a hot air balloon from the roof of the school, which I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure I would see a hot air balloon on top of a building.
Yeah, they're not exactly compact.
Yeah, you can't really hide that.
Or like some kid would come home from school and be like, I rode in a hot air balloon today, Mom.
Oh, God, yeah. That'd be the first thing, yeah.
Exactly.
Also, at one point, the children were shown photos of people so that they could kind of point out who they saw at these rituals. Well, one of the kids had pointed out Chuck Norris is one of the people at these rituals. And I think another one was a DA, wasn't it? I think.
Something like that,
yeah,
I think.
But Chuck Norris was the one that stuck out to me.
I hope they went and arrested Chuck Norris.
Right.
They're going to be that serious about it.
Yeah.
He is. I don't know that the police could actually physically apprehend him.
He's known for his satanic rituals, you know.
Right. The absurdity of this case so far is just like, really? So did you go arrest Chuck Norris? Like, I don't know. What are you guys even doing?
Because you did arrest this guy.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm reading all of this going, and this went to court. And this went to court?
Ooh, let's keep going. I'm ready.
It's very rare that I play the part of the defense attorney, but I'm kind of on their side.
Yep.
I mean, yeah. Children also claim to have been flushed down toilets to get to other rooms, which I put in my notes a la Harry Potter. There were also allegations of orgies at car washes and airports. I don't know why children would be at car washes and airports.
They took a big field trip to an airport for an orgy no one noticed.
Yeah. There was also an allegation of children mentioning something called naked movie star. Now, this one, out of everything else that I have just mentioned, this is the one that sounds the most concerning and actually believable. But it turns out that this was a song that the kids were singing to each other to taunt them, which is, what you say is what you are, you're a naked movie star.
Which I've heard that as a kid before.
Oh, have you? I've never heard of it.
I've never heard it either.
I've heard, like, I mean, my mom worked in a daycare for years.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
But just things like that. I don't know if it was verbatim, but I mean.
I'm rubber, you're glue.
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very believable.
So, but I mean, I understand, like, if my kid came and said, hey, we were playing naked movie star, about hold up.
Tell me about that.
Let me know about that.
Right.
But some of these kids were like, no, that wasn't, it was just a song we sang. Like, the kids were even saying, this is a song we sang. There was nothing to that. Eventually, in March 1984, Virginia McMartin, Peggy McMartin Bucky, Ray Bucky, Peggy Ann Bucky, and teachers Mary Ann Jackson, Betty Rader, and Babette Spittler were charged with 115 counts of child abuse.
Wow.
Based on this information. Now, this later expanded to 321 counts of child abuse involving 48 children. From this information.
Wow.
Yeah. The preliminary hearings lasted almost 2 years. Lael Rubin, who led the prosecution, presented his sexual abuse theory. However, the children's testimonies were inconsistent throughout.
Oh, really? Wow.
Imagine that. And in 1986, District Attorney Ira Rayner called the evidence incredibly weak and dropped all charges against Virginia McMartin, Peggy Ann Bucky, Marianne Jackson, Betty Rader, and Babette Spittler, which left Ray Bucky and his mother, Peggy McMartin Bucky, in custody to await trial. They were the two left to go to trial.
So why did they drop it against everyone but them?
They said that this evidence, there was nothing against these other people. They had no evidence against these other people.
And they went ahead and arrested them anyway.
Yeah.
That's kind of something that's called a false arrest.
Yeah. Imagine that.
Because that doesn't even meet the threshold of probable cause, in my opinion.
But now their names are already dragged through the mud.
You can't take that back.
You can't take that back. But, these people were on TV being arrested. They have their faces, they have their names, and now they will probably forever be known as the child molesters.
And see, that's why we, as law enforcement officers, we don't make arrests like this based on weak evidence.
Yep.
In fact, our area has a process where we actually meet with the district attorneys, assistant district attorneys, and we discuss the cases before the officer makes any sort of decision. In most cases.
Yeah.
When the evidence is egregious enough that I'm confident enough that it's a good case, then I will go ahead and just take the warrant, but not without discussing it with the prosecutor first.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's good.
Because of stuff like this, if we make a bad call, that person can't get their life back.
Yeah. Well, who's that teacher's name?
Tanya Kraft.
Yeah, Tanya Kraft. She was accused of molesting one of her students, and
I don't know the whole scenario.
I can't remember the whole story, but she didn't do it. But everybody knows her name, Tanya Kraft. She molested that kid. Remember?
Oh, yep. That's what happens.
Yeah. The first trial opened on July 13th, 1987. The prosecution presented 7 medical witnesses, and the defense tried to rebut them with several witnesses, but the judge only limited them to 1 to save time. So, of course, the prosecution is like, well, we had more experts than you, so obviously we're right.
That's insane.
Yeah, even though the DA had witnesses to rebut every single one of these.
Who are these judges that are giving the go-ahead on this case?
I don't know.
Some judge heard all this evidence and was like, yep, that sounds good, let's do it.
The term witch hunt was appropriately applied to this. And, of course, I'm sure maybe the judges were like, yeah, they're guilty. Done. Unfortunately, that's how it works sometimes.
Judges are just as much politicians as people running for any other office.
Sure.
Yeah.
This was an enormous case.
Yeah, you're right.
You as a judge would have probably wanted this in your courtroom, thinking that it's a solid case because look at them, they're guilty.
Yeah. Think about it. Ray Bucky. He's 25 years old.
Lives at home with mom.
He's working at a daycare as the only male, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. It's an unusual job for a 25-year-old man.
But also look at that on the flip side.
I agree.
He's 25 years old. He apparently was divorced from Judy Johnson. So he was probably living with mom to pick himself back up, and he needed a job. But, I can see it both ways.
But, yeah, those are not my views. Those are just...
Yeah, that's how society looks at it.
That's a societal view.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that this all could have been prevented had someone just said, hey, maybe this lady with paranoid schizophrenia accusing her ex-husband of molesting a bunch of kids might not be the best source. I'm not saying that people with schizophrenia can't be a reliable source.
Right.
They absolutely can be. But when she's talking about flying goats and
flying people
and everyone's just like, yeah, that sounds good, let's do it.
Yeah, it's insane how people just latched onto this, because I'm looking at it going, what? But people were all over this, and you really had 2 people here, two groups of people. You had the people who were going, well, kids don't lie, kids wouldn't lie about this, kids don't lie. And then you had the other side of them going, they're kids. We're not going to trust anything they say.
And see, that is a good point. Kids typically don't lie when it comes to stuff like this,
unless you put it in their head.
Unless they're getting it from a coached source. It's
which is absolutely 100% what happened here, period.
You know, again, we look for the sensory details to determine the truth.
Yeah.
The truth is in the details.
Yeah.
And not these kind.
And this case is probably what...
It's one of them, for sure.
Yeah, this case is probably why you guys look for those details.
Right.
Exactly. Then in October of 1989, during the first trial, there's 2 trials, jailhouse informant George Freeman was called as a witness. Now, he testified that Ray Buckey confessed everything to him while they were sharing a cell together. He said that Ray admitted to having to use lube with the kids, yada, yada, yada. But later, Freeman actually tried to flee the country and then finally confessed to perjury to several other criminal cases to receive favorable treatment by prosecution, and that he was offered immunity to all these previous charges of perjury if he testified in the McMartin case.
So if you perjure yourself on this trial, we'll get rid of all the other perjuries.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So this was false. Now, also in 1989, Peggy Ann Buckey actually appealed to have her teaching credentials reinstated. The judge ruled that there was no credible evidence to lead to her revoked license. Like, we don't know why your license was revoked. There shouldn't have been. And that there was no evidence in the children's interviews that implicated Peggy Ann at all. And the judge actually also stated that this, quote, raises additional doubts of credibility with respect to the children interviewed or with respect to the value of CII interviewing techniques themselves. So already this judge is questioning the interviews now. And the
Thank
evidence.
God somebody is.
And, I mean, just if anybody's curious, the next day Peggy Ann's license was restored.
Well, at least there's that, I guess.
But I don't know if anyone hired her.
Right.
It probably depends on how far away she moved.
That's true. That's true. Finally, in January of 1990, Peggy McMartin Buckey was acquitted on all accounts. So she was let go. And Ray Buckey was cleared of 52 of 65 counts. And he was freed on bail. During a press conference, 9 of the 11 jurors stated that they believed that the children may have been molested, but the evidence didn't allow them to figure out who actually committed the abuse beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Like, this evidence was so screwed up, we don't know who did it.
So it's a solid maybe.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe they were abused, but
honestly,
we don't know who.
I mean, I don't have all the evidence. They've messed up this evidence, but I wonder if maybe one of the kids or some of the kids had been abused, but we'll never know.
Right. I mean, that's why some stuff like this damages the case it kills it. I mean, there's nothing that can be done.
Now, during the second trial, it was May 7th, 1990. It was pretty quick. Ray was tried on 6 of the 13 counts that he wasn't acquitted on before. It resulted in another hung jury, and the prosecution finally gave up trying to even obtain a conviction. So the case was closed with all charges against Ray Buckey dropped.
Well, at least there's that, I guess.
Thank God for juries.
Well, sometimes.
I mean,
Yeah, sometimes.
Look at you, Tracy Anthony.
They're a double-edged sword, but
Yeah.
it only takes one to convince that you're not guilty of.
Yeah. So some of the outcomes, the best thing that could have happened from this case is that shortly after the McMartin trial, funds to research child sexual abuse increased greatly, notably through the National Center of Child Abuse and Neglect. Their budget increased from $1.8 million to $7.2 million just between 83 and 84, and then up to $15 million in 1985. So they had a bigger budget to work with cases like this. However, things like teachers are now probably afraid to hug or touch their students, which I've actually heard of even around here.
Right.
Because they're afraid of something like this happening. They don't want to be accused of abusing a child. And, I mean, I know we've mentioned it before, but like I said, I believe this did these kids a great disservice, because if some of these kids had actually been abused, now we'll never know. And they don't have the closure they need because their abuser wasn't put away. And they're having to watch them get off scot-free.
Mm-hmm. Or even if those kids were later abused in their lives.
Oh, yeah. Why would they tell anyone?
Why would they tell anyone if it didn't work the first time?
Exactly.
Right.
That's just, it's just so messed up. But I did have a few questions for Ronny. You know, how do you interview children in this? I know you don't personally, but
like I said, I mean, I have before.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't like to, because, you know, it's different talking to someone in a child-friendly room
yeah,
versus talking to a guy with a badge and gun on their hip.
That's true. That's true.
And so, I mean, I prefer it. Now, typically with older children, teenagers, stuff like that, I usually ask them, would you rather talk to an advocate, a forensic interviewer, or would you rather talk to just the police?
Yeah.
And typically they say whichever one you prefer me to talk to. And that's usually when I schedule the forensic interview with the Child Advocacy and Sexual Assault Center. You know, I touched on it before, we ask open-ended questions. We're not going to say, well, tell me about this case where your dad touched you there. We're going to ask, why are you here?
Yeah. Typically
in younger kids, they've kind of forgotten why they're there. They know that they that's not saying they forgot what happened. It's just, you know, they just don't really know why they're here. Well, they'll say, oh, my mom brought me here. Oh, why'd your mom bring you here?
Okay, yeah.
And it just leads into that type of questioning. It's never...
did she bring you here because you were touched funny? Or,
right.
Nothing like that.
Yeah.
Right. And like I said, it doesn't start out with those questions. It starts out with what we call the rapport building phase.
Right.
It's where you talk about school, you talk about friends, family, who do you live with, stuff like that. And sometimes in that process, they'll say, I used to live with my dad, but a couple days ago, he had to move. He had to leave. We can bring that up later on and say, well, why did he have to leave?
Yeah. Okay.
That way, there's no suggestibility. There's nothing that the interview is saying to the child that gives them any sort of direction they want it to go.
Yeah.
We don't do what this person did and say, and give positive feedback for responses that we like.
Yeah.
You know, you'll never hear her say, oh, well, good job. I'm so happy you told me that this happened. I mean, it's the most we'll say is, well, thank you for talking to me today. And I mean, it's very...
Well, and I'm sure that's at the end too.
Right.
So.
And it's just that's a better environment to talk rather than an interrogation room.
Right. Yeah, I can see how that would be intimidating.
Yeah.
Is there a way to tell the difference between what they're saying is true or if they're exaggerating or just feeding off of somebody else?
We look for signs of what we call third-party influence coaching. And like I said, typically when a child can't provide sensory details, how it felt, what it looked like,
right.
how it made you feel, that's kind of a red flag for us. We don't get hung up on dates a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, because that's hard to remember anyway as a kid.
But we ask, well, how many times did this happen? One time or more than one time?
Okay.
We don't ask for, tell me exactly how many times it happened. We ask where you were at when it happened. Was there anybody else around? And we look for those type of details. We don't... Like in this interview where it's not fantastical. It's not, what really bothers juries is they go in with a biased mindset of how a sexual assault victim should act.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's true.
And
We've done cases like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had one that comes to mind right now. I've had a teenager come into the interview room before. And when she's talking about what happened to her, she's smiling the whole time. However, tears rolling down her face.
Mm-hmm.
There's no cookie cutter way for a victim to act.
Right.
To me, that's golden. When you can see this struggle of emotion take place. And so that's what we try to tell our jurors, that we don't put a lot of emphasis on how they acted.
Yeah, I would probably just be out of luck if they did, because when I get super stressed out and nervous about stuff, I laugh.
Yep.
Uncontrollably.
And that's very common.
I make inappropriate jokes
when my toddler's having like a temper tantrum and screaming and having a meltdown and I can't do anything, I just start giggling.
Yep.
And it's the worst. I have no control over it. And I'm sure I would do that if I was ever in court.
Oh, yeah.
I would just start laughing.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's very common. It's not, like I said, there's no cookie cutter way a victim is supposed to act, but unfortunately society has said that there is.
And I think that's really important that people understand. And it's the same way with grief.
Right.
We've talked about that too.
Yep. Especially that one.
Yeah, especially grief.
Right.
Because, there's no right or wrong way. It's just you're feeling your emotions and you're struggling with them.
Right.
That's what it is.
So do you, cry on your kid's birthday, or do you have a silly string party?
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm not going to comment on that.
Should have had you on for that one, huh? And I guess this is a combo question. What are some signs parents can look for for sexual abuse? And what advice would you give them if they suspect sexual abuse?
I'm not really an expert in sexual abuse in and of itself,
Right.
other than just the investigation of the criminal aspect. But the psychology behind it, I'm not an expert in. But what I typically see in these type cases, the child acts out sexually inappropriately. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that a child's not curious about
that's normal.
Right. Genital curiosity is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the child is saying things that are sexual, acting out sexually.
Right.
A big one is when you have a potty trained child that, I'm not talking about a simple just, they had a few accidents.
Yeah.
That type of regression. I'm talking about a fully potty trained child suddenly becomes just unable to use the potty.
Yeah.
We see that a lot.
Well, that makes sense. I get it.
Especially when the abuse is in the rectal area.
Yeah.
Bedwetting from a formerly potty trained child is another kind of red flag.
Yeah.
But again, I don't get hung up on any of these. There are other things that could have caused this.
Well, I was going to say there's a lot of other things that go along with that.
Without a disclosure, there's not a lot that I'd say, oh, yes, this child has definitely been molested.
Right.
And what I would say to parents is just educate your child. Preventative. Good touch, bad touch is a good thing, but it needs to. A lot of the school systems have good intentions, in my opinion. This is Ronny's opinion, but when there's been some teachers that force the child to write about a scenario, when they have these good touch, bad touch type things,
I never thought about that because we did that too,
and it drives us crazy as investigators because there's.
Yeah.
Nothing that we can do about it. I mean, we don't know if this child's telling the truth or not at this point.
Because that's the creating a scenario.
But and again, for parents, if you have a child that discloses, please, please, please don't go to the person that did it.
Yeah.
That is a huge blow to our case and a huge blow to your child getting what they need.
Yeah.
It's tempting to want to run to that person and confront them and find out.
Oh, absolutely. That would be my first.
So the first person you need to talk to is a 911 dispatcher.
Yeah.
And you need to talk to the police.
Okay. Also, believing your child.
Yes. That's the biggest thing is you need to believe your child. I mean, I tell people that if your child willingly comes to you and says, hey, I've been molested, there is a strong possibility that is fact.
Yeah.
Children, especially when there's no there's not a motive for a child to lie. Children, in reference to sexual abuse, there is a motive to lie to get out of trouble. That is common with kids. I mean, kids will lie to get out of trouble. That's not unusual.
Yeah.
So when a child comes forward with something that they have no motive to make up, chances are it's truth.
Yeah.
And to believe your child and then take necessary action and talk to local law enforcement.
Thanks for listening.
Like us on Facebook at True Crimes and Weird Times Podcast.
Follow us on Instagram at True Crimes Weird Times.
Email us your stories at truecrimesweirdtimes@gmail.com.
And if you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe and leave a review.
Bye.